Florence, Italy, the city of Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and Botticelli, where millions travel each year to stand in awe of the Duomo, sip espresso in the piazzas, and lose themselves in the romance of Tuscany. But beneath the postcard perfection lies a darkness few talk about openly, a darkness that haunted this region for nearly 2 decades. From 1974 to 1985, couples parked in cars on quiet country roads were stalked, ambushed, and brutally murdered. The weapon was always the same, the killer's precision, unmistakable. The media gave him a name that still chills Italians to this day: Il Mostro di Firenze, the Monster of Florence. And after almost 50 years, he has never been caught. It is the summer of 1974. Florence basks under the Tuscan sun. Tourists spill into Piazza della Signoria, admiring statues and fountains. Street performers strum guitars. Cafes hum with conversations. But just 20 minutes outside the city, the scenery shifts. Narrow country lanes wind past olive groves and cypress trees. The air is still. The only light at night comes from the stars and the occasional headlights of cars pulling off to the side of the road. This is where young lovers come, seeking privacy, seeking escape. But tonight, someone else is here too. Someone waiting, watching. The first victims were Antonio Lo Bianco and Barbara Lacci. Their bodies were discovered in their car, shot dead. The murder shocked their small town, but investigators quickly wrote it off as a crime of passion. Italy in the 1970s was no stranger to violence, and rural killings rarely made headlines. But the truth was far darker. The monster had claimed his first known victims, and he wasn't finished. Over the next decade, more couples were found. Always in cars, always ambushed late at night, always the same caliber pistol. The monster's victims came from different walks of life. Teenagers, engaged couples, even married lovers sneaking away in secret. But the killer's ritual never changed. First, the shooting, then, sometimes mutilation of the female victims, carried out with surgical precision. By 1981, fear gripped Florence. Local newspapers ran headlines warning couples not to park on country roads. Police increased patrols, but the hills and vineyards of Tuscany stretched for miles, impossible to cover completely. The city of romance had become a city of dread. Italian authorities launched one of the largest investigations in their history. Dozens of detectives, hundreds of interviews, thousands of man-hours. The only solid clue was ballistic. Every bullet traced back to the same Beretta .22 caliber pistol. But the gun was never found. And without it, the police were hunting a shadow. Pressure mounted. Politicians demanded answers. Families of victims demanded justice. And under that pressure, mistakes were made. The first to fall under suspicion was Stefano Mele, the husband of Barbara Lacci, one of the earliest victims. Police theorized a jealous rage. He confessed under pressure but later recanted, saying he had been coerced. Mele served time, but the killings continued while he was behind bars. The real killer was still free. In later years, other men were accused. A voyeur, farmer, even a respected doctor. Each time, the authorities announced they had caught the monster. Each time, evidence unraveled. The investigation became a revolving door of suspects and a graveyard of reputations. By the mid-1980s, Florence was a city living in fear. Couples no longer parked on country roads. Parents warned their children never to wander too far. Tourists still came, marveling at the Uffizi and the Ponte Vecchio. But locals whispered, the monster could strike again any night. The murders cast a shadow not just over Florence, but over the very image of Italy abroad. Theories about the monster multiplied. Was he a lone sadist with a twisted obsession? A man with surgical training, given the precision of the mutilations? Or was he part of a group, a cult, carrying out ritualistic killings? Some believed the monster was connected to powerful figures, which explained why he was never caught. Others thought he had simply vanished, melted back into anonymity. True crime authors, journalists, and even FBI profilers weighed in. Some claimed to have solved it. Others admitted the evidence was too murky, the leads too cold. but none could provide proof strong enough to end the case. In 1985, the investigation took a chilling turn. A newspaper received an anonymous letter. Inside was a bullet casing fired from the monster's gun. It was a message. The monster wasn't just killing. He was watching, and he wanted Florence to know it. Police scrambled. They checked postmarks, fingerprints, every possible lead. But once again, the trail went cold. The monster was a ghost. After 1985, the killings stopped. Some believe the monster died. Others think he was arrested on unrelated charges. Still others whisper that he left Italy, starting a new life, or continuing his killings somewhere else. But the truth is, no one knows, and perhaps that's the most terrifying part. The monster could have been anyone: a neighbor, a shopkeeper, a man sipping espresso beside you in a cafe. The face of Il Mostro remains hidden. The Monster of Florence remains one of the most infamous unsolved serial killer cases in the world. Books, documentaries, and even Hollywood films have tried to unravel the mystery. But the answers are still buried in the Tuscan hills. Florence will forever be remembered for its art, its beauty, its history, but it will also forever carry the shadow of the monster. It was Saturday, September 14th, 1974. The countryside near Borgo San Lorenzo was quiet, a chill in the evening air. On a dirt road, Stefano Baldi and Giovanna Fagini, both young and hopeful, pulled their car into a secluded spot. It was supposed to be a night of romance, but just after midnight, their laughter turned into screams. Neighbors later reported hearing shots echoing across the fields. By morning, their bodies were discovered, shot. The scene was brutal, clinical, and cold. The police whispered, "It's the same killer." This second crime established a pattern. The victims weren't random. They were couples, always couples. The killer was hunting intimacy itself. But why? Revenge? Jealousy? A perverse ritual? No one knew. News spread quickly. Florence, the cradle of Renaissance art, was now the hunting ground of a predator. Cafés buzzed with rumors. "Did you hear? He strikes only at lovers." Parents begged their children not to venture into the hills after dark. Still, young couples thought it would never be them. They thought they were safe. They weren't. In 1981, tragedy struck again. Two teenagers, Antonella Migliorini and Stefano Pettini, were found murdered. The details were gruesome. The killer had escalated. The word monster began to appear in headlines. The Florence police faced enormous pressure. Politicians demanded results. Detectives set up roadblocks, conducted random car searches, and even deployed plainclothes officers to lovers' lanes. But the monster always seemed one step ahead. He struck when least expected, then vanished into the Tuscan night. Meanwhile, the public turned against the police. How can they not catch him? Florence is not that big, critics said. Some accused the investigators of incompetence. Others whispered of corruption. The case was no longer just about murders. It was about the soul of Florence itself. Forensic reports revealed something disturbing. The killer didn't just shoot his victims. In some cases, he mutilated the female victims with surgical precision. This suggested medical knowledge or an obsession with anatomy. Doctors, surgeons, and even butchers came under suspicion. The media fueled the horror. Newspapers published graphic descriptions. Talk shows speculated about satanic cults. Florence became not only a city of art, but also the city of whispered fear. In 1982, police arrested Francesco Vinci, a local farmer. He was accused, paraded before the cameras. But while Vinci sat in jail, the monster struck again. The police had the wrong man. This repeated again and again. Every time a suspect was arrested, the killings continued. Each mistake eroded public trust. The people of Florence began to believe the monster would never be caught. The Italian police sought help from abroad. In 1984, FBI profilers were consulted. Their analysis was chilling. The monster was likely a man in his 30s or 40s. He was intelligent, organized, and socially invisible. He held a deep hatred toward women, perhaps fueled by personal trauma. But most terrifying of all, the monster enjoyed the fear he created. The killings weren't just murders. They were a message. By 1985, Florence was suffocating under paranoia. Police patrolled the hills with helicopters. Priests warned their congregations to stay vigilant. Couples stopped going out at night. The Tuscan countryside, once a symbol of romance, became a landscape of terror. And then, the monster vanished. After September 1985, no more bodies were found. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Had he died? Been jailed for another crime? Or was he still out there, watching, waiting? Over the decades, theories multiplied. Some said the monster was a lone hunter. Others swore he was part of a group, a cult practicing ritual sacrifices. Some even accused powerful men, claiming a cover-up reached into the highest offices of Italy. Books were written, movies were made, but every new claim seemed to raise more questions than answers. The monster remained a riddle carved into Florence's history. Decades later, the scars remain. Survivors' families still gather, still demand justice. Detectives who worked the case confess they still dream of it. And the people of Florence, though proud of their art and culture, still whisper when the sun goes down. Il Mostro might still be among us. Years after the last murder, journalists began retracing the monster's steps. They walked the same dirt paths. They stood in the same clearings where cars had once been parked, where young couples had whispered secrets before the nightmare began. The silence of the countryside was deafening. The wind rustled through the olive trees, carrying only the echoes of lives cut short. At each crime scene, patterns emerged. Remote areas, a lover seeking privacy, the killer approaching with clinical precision. Investigators realized the monster knew the countryside intimately. These weren't random spots. He had scouted them, chosen them, waited for his prey. By the mid-1980s, Florence's newspapers splashed the monster across their front pages daily. Il Mostro strikes again. Who hunts in the hills of Tuscany? Is the monster watching us? The city was obsessed. Reporters dug into every suspect's past. Rumors of satanic rituals spread like wildfire. For many, fear became routine. Couples no longer went into the countryside. Families locked their doors earlier. Police patrols became a common sight. Florence, once a city of romance and Renaissance beauty, was drowning in paranoia. Attention soon turned to Pietro Pacciani, a farmer with a dark past. Convicted years earlier of violent crimes, he seemed to fit the profile. Police arrested him in 1993, nearly a decade after the killings stopped. The media declared victory, but then cracks appeared in the case. Evidence was circumstantial. Witnesses were unreliable. And when Pacciani died before his retrial, the truth slipped through Florence's fingers once again. Had they caught the wrong man? Or had the monster simply taken his secrets to the grave? Whispers of a secret society began to dominate the narrative. Some claimed the monster wasn't one man at all, but a group, a cabal of powerful men who used the killings as ritual sacrifices. The theory gained traction. Strange symbols, odd witness testimonies, and missing evidence all seemed to point towards something darker. But concrete proof never came. Each cult lead ended in dead ends. Still, the theory stuck. And for many Italians, it remains the most chilling explanation. The FBI's profilers revisited the case in the late 1990s. They painted a picture of a man who hated intimacy, who struck out at couples because he could never have what they did. The killer was likely local, possibly even someone who blended into the very crowds that mourned the victims. And the most terrifying part? He may still be alive, watching, listening, waiting. Today, Florence still carries the weight of the monster's shadow. Locals can point to the hills where the murders took place. Survivors' families still lay flowers. Tourists visit the Renaissance art, the cathedrals, the museums, unaware that just outside the city lies one of the darkest unsolved mysteries in history. The Monster of Florence wasn't just a killer. He was a phantom, a ghost that shaped the psyche of an entire city. And until the truth comes to light, Florence will never truly rest. It was a warm summer evening in September 1983 when German tourist Horst Meyer and his girlfriend Uwe Rush parked their VW camper van on the outskirts of Florence. They weren't locals. They didn't know the stories whispered in the villages, the warnings to couples never to stop in the hills at night. To them, the Tuscan countryside was just a backdrop for romance. What they didn't know was that the monster was watching. The same precision, the same cruelty. Pistol fired into the van. Windows shattered. And when the gunfire stopped, silence fell across the field. The killer lingered. As always, he mutilated the bodies. Clinical, ritualistic. It was as if the act itself wasn't enough. He had to leave a message. The next morning, villagers stumbled across the blood-stained van. The horror spread instantly. Another couple, another brutal killing. Police swarmed the scene. By now, they recognized the monster's work. The same weapon, the same precision. Florence froze in terror. Parents warned their children not to date. Lovers avoided the hills. Even married couples kept their evenings close to home. The city of romance had been turned into a fortress of fear. Headlines screamed, "The monster kills tourists." International attention grew. The murders were no longer a local horror, they were a global scandal. If tourists weren't safe, who was? Reporters stalked the crime scenes, snapping photos of grieving families, splashing the victims' names across front pages. The monster wasn't just killing bodies anymore. He was killing Florence's reputation. Pietro Pacciani, farmer, an ex-convict, a man with violent tendencies and a criminal record that made him an easy target. Police zeroed in, but the evidence was thin. Neighbors whispered he was strange. Yes, brutal even. But was he the monster? Or was he just another man caught in the hysteria? 1993. Nearly a decade after the last murder, Pacciani was dragged into court. Cameras flashed. Prosecutors painted him as a sadistic farmer who turned his rage into ritual. The jury convicted him. Florence cheered. But the celebration didn't last. On appeal, the case unraveled. Evidence that once seemed damning fell apart. Witnesses changed their stories. The conviction was overturned. Florence was back to square one. Before a retrial could seal his fate, Pacciani died suddenly of a heart attack. The monster case was once again without a face. Was Pacciani guilty, or had the true monster simply slipped away, smiling in the shadows while Florence buried yet another wrong man? The failures in court fueled a darker theory. What if the monster wasn't just one man? What if it was a group? Investigators began whispering about secret societies. Groups of wealthy, powerful Florentines who demanded the murders as part of ritual sacrifices. The mutilations, the consistency, the secrecy, it all seemed to fit. But the evidence was always one step away, always missing. The FBI revisited the case. Their profiling was chilling. The killer or killers were likely part of the very fabric of Florence. Respectable in public, monsters in private, someone who knew the hills, someone who blended into society. Their conclusion was grim. Unless someone confessed, the monster of Florence might never be caught. And worse still, if he was still alive, he could be anywhere. Decades later, Florence remains haunted. Couples avoid certain fields. Locals still talk in hushed tones when the murders are mentioned. True crime fans flock to the hills, tracing the paths where cars once parked, standing in the fields where lives were stolen. But Florence hasn't forgotten, and it never will. June 1982, Florence. Paolo Mainardi and his girlfriend, Antonella Migliorini, parked their car in an olive grove just outside town. They were young, in love, and despite the warnings, they thought nothing would happen to them. But that night, the monster returned. Shots cracked the silence. Glass shattered. Paolo tried to start the car, desperate to drive away, but the bullets found him. Antonella screamed, her voice carrying into the hills, and then silence. The monster had struck again. In that attack, something different happened. Paolo didn't die instantly. Mortally wounded, he managed to crawl out of the car. He staggered toward the road, leaving a trail of blood behind. He collapsed, barely alive when rescuers found him. But he never spoke again. If he had lived long enough to describe what he saw, maybe Florence would know the truth today. But the monster silenced him forever. The horror of these crimes wasn't confined to adults. More than once, children stumbled onto the crime scenes, playing in the fields, riding bicycles down dirt roads. Innocent games cut short by unimaginable discovery. The images scarred them for life. A mutilated couple, blood soaking into the earth, windows shot out, glass glittering in the morning sun. The monster wasn't just murdering couples. He was murdering innocence, leaving scars on the community that would never fade. Florence changed in those years. Lovers stopped meeting in the hills. Parents locked their doors earlier. The countryside, once the most romantic landscape in Italy, became a place of whispers and warnings. Even the police weren't immune. Off-duty officers avoided late-night drives. Some carried extra weapons. The fear was total. The city of Renaissance art and light was living under a medieval terror. As the murders stretched over years, one question grew louder. Could it really be the same man? The killings were consistent. The weapon was the same. The rituals identical. But the timeline, it stretched across 2 decades. Could one man really evade police for that long? Some investigators whispered, maybe there wasn't one monster. Maybe there were many. Copycat, a cult, or a network passing down the weapon like a cursed inheritance. Another theory grew darker still. Italy in the 1980s and 90s was no stranger to corruption. The mafia had its roots everywhere. Politics, police, courts. What if the monster had protection? What if someone high up benefited from the killings staying unsolved? It wasn't just paranoia. Every time the investigation got close to answers, files disappeared. Leads were ignored. Evidence vanished. Was the Monster of Florence shielded by the very system meant to stop him? The monster's legend grew beyond police reports. Writers, journalists, true crime investigators from across the world flew to Florence. One of them, American author Douglas Preston, dug deep into the case. His research was relentless, but his curiosity came with a price. Italian police didn't like outsiders prying. Preston was even interrogated, accused of interfering. Some say he was run out of the country, but his book, The Monster of Florence, ensured the killer's story reached millions. It's been decades since the last murder, and yet the case refuses to die. Every few years, Florence police announce new leads, a new DNA sample, a new suspect, but nothing ever sticks. The monster has become more than a man. He's a myth, a curse whispered in Tuscan hills. Parents still warn their children, don't park in the fields, don't tempt fate. The monster may still be out there. If the monster was in his 30s or 40s during the killings of the 1970s and 80s, then today he could still be alive, an old man in his 70s or 80s. Maybe he lives quietly in Florence. Maybe he sits in cafes, sipping espresso, overhearing conversations about the case, smiling to himself. The thought chills the city, because the monster isn't just a story. He's a shadow Florence has never escaped. After all the theories, all the trials, all the suspects, one truth remains. The Monster of Florence was never caught, and that makes him one of the most terrifying killers in history, not just for the brutality of the crimes, but because he proved that even in a modern city with police, technology, and international pressure, a killer could still vanish into the night. The Tuscan hills are still beautiful. Lovers still walk hand in hand. But every shadow hides a memory. Every olive grove whispers a warning. The Monster of Florence killed not just couples, but an entire city's sense of safety. And the question that still lingers, decades later, is the one that chills the most. Was it one man, or is the monster still among us?